would. So whenever we study the Civil War, it sort of seems like naturally with the Union victory that slavery would have been abolished at the end. But in actuality, it could have turned out a number of different ways. What determines the outcome of historical events are individuals and their actions that they decide to take in the moment. Split-second decisions made by individuals. Presidents, politicians, soldiers, women and children sometimes even. So as I give this brief history talk, as you walk around the fort today and read about the history of the Civil War and the events here at Fort Sumter, I want you to think about those individuals. Think about the actions that they took. Think about whether they were aware or unaware of the importance of those actions. And think about if they knew how they were playing a role in the overall course of our history. And with that being said, let me get started. So the first shots of the Civil War happened here at Fort Sumter, April 12th, 1861. Before we can get to that date, we've got to go back in time a little bit. About 50 years to the War of 1812. Specifically the year 1814. Some of you might know this old song goes, in 1814 we took a little trip with old Colonel Jackson down the mighty Mississippi. I'm not going to talk about that trip today. I'm talking about a different trip. One taken by the English up into the Chesapeake Harbor. They're going to land outside of Washington, D.C., find it very lightly defended, so lightly defended that they're able to burn it down to the ground. They're going to burn the White House and the Capitol building. President James Madison, his wife Dolly, and their one son are just barely able to escape being captured by the English as they flee the city. Now, when that war ends in an American victory, thanks in part to Colonel Jackson, Madison's going to commission what's called the Third American System of Coastal Defense. He doesn't want what happened to Washington, D.C. in the War of 1812 to ever happen again, nor does he want it to happen to any other important coastal city. So Fort Sumter is a part of that Third American System. Construction of this fort will begin in 1829, but as some of you may have noticed on the boat ride in here, we're literally smack dab in the middle of Charleston Harbor. In 1829, where we're all standing right now, we'd be about under 8 feet of water. So I hope you guys are really good swimmers. It's going to take 15 years for them to build an island, and in order to do so, they're going to quarry about 70,000 tons of rock from the New England area, as far away up as Maine, quarry that rock, put it on ships, sail it down the East Coast where it'll arrive here in Charleston Harbor, and it'll be the jobs of slaves to individually throw boulders weighing between 50 and 500 pounds overboard, one at a time, hand by hand. Like I said, that work takes about 15 years to complete, but when they're done, they build an island about 2.5 acres in size. So now that we've got that island built, we can all stop treading water for a bit, and we can look around and we'll see that this fort is made up of bricks. And if you look around, you're actually going to see that we're only looking at about 1/3 of the original fort. There would have been another story on top of this one, and then another one on top of this one. If you can look out there, you're going to see a red line on that flagpole about halfway down. That line marks about 50 feet above the low tide. The height of these walls when the fort is quote-unquote complete. I say complete because it never is actually finished. 31 years it takes for them to build this fort after 1829, the first half of the Civil War happened. This fort still stands only about 80 to 90% complete. So 30 plus years, 80-90%, sounds pretty much on schedule for government work if you ask me. But as I said, if you look around, you're going to see bricks. This fort's made up of millions and millions of bricks. Those walls were 50 feet high, as I said, walls 5 feet thick. So I'm literally talking about millions and millions and millions of bricks. It's something to think about because each one of those bricks is going to be made by enslaved individuals laboring on the plantations surrounding the Charleston area. Their fingerprints are literally still marked in those bricks today, and you can see some of them if you'd like. So, they've got this island built. They've got all these millions and millions of bricks ready to go. They start building the fort, and as I said, by the time of the Civil War, it's only about 80 to 90% complete. So let's jump ahead to 1860. It's an election year. There's a man running under the Republican platform of the non-expansion of slavery into the Western territories. Basically what that means is if you're a slave-holding state in the South, you'll be allowed to keep your slaves, keep that institution, but no new state admitted to the Union will be allowed to have slaves in it. Now, states like South Carolina and other southern states, they're not a huge fan of this platform. See, for the last 50 or so years, there's been a balance of power in Congress between free and slave states. If no new slave states are admitted to the Union in equal proportion to free states, then very quickly, free states will outnumber slave states in Congress. Congress could pass a law abolishing slavery altogether, and that would destroy the Southern economy, and according to what some in the South believe is their God-given right to own other individuals as property. So that 1860 election rolls around. 82% of Americans will take part in that election. It's the highest voter turnout up to that time in American history. It's the second largest voter turnout to date. Obviously, these people were very concerned about the outcome of the 1860 election. So there's going to be a man, like I said, running on the Republican platform. He's wearing a funny hat, he's got a funny beard, he's going to win. Does anybody know who I'm talking about here? Abe Lincoln, that's right. Somebody said George Washington yesterday. I thought that was a pretty funny joke, but no, it's Abe Lincoln. Abe Lincoln. So Lincoln's going to win that election. He's going to win with less than 40% of the popular vote. He won't appear on a single ballot in 10 southern states. That 40% of popular vote makes him the second least popular president in American history, according to the popular vote. With his winning of the election, states like South Carolina and other southern states, they are not too happy. South Carolina will secede a month later, was one of their reasons stated being that they have elected a president who is hostile to the institution of slavery. So December 20th, 1860, South Carolina sees that they're going to go ahead and leave this union, practicing, in their opinion, the exact same right of self-determination that the English colonies did in 1776 when they broke away from the English Empire. Over the course of the next few days, militia groups will go around the state seizing federal property. That includes courthouses, post office, and yes, military installations. So over on Sullivan's Island over there, Fort Moultrie, there's a Major Robert Anderson. He's a federal troop commander. He's got about 80 plus men with him over at Moultrie. They've seen what's been happening over the last couple of days, and they're worried that their fort's going to be next. So on the night of December 26th, he's going to sail his men under the cover of darkness across the harbor here into Fort Sumter. The next morning, he'll raise a gigantic American flag on the flagpole, 20 feet tall, 36 feet long, so big you can see it from downtown Charleston. And those people in Charleston, whenever they wake up that morning, they see that flag, and they're not too happy. Just 7 days ago, they had declared themselves independent of the United States, and now we have a federal force sitting right in the middle of Charleston Harbor, declaring this fort as federal property. So, they're going to send a delegation over. They're going to ask Anderson to kindly leave. They're not going to threaten him or anything like that. They're just going to say, look, you turn the fort over to us, you head back home, no harm, no foul. Anderson basically replies with, you have your orders and I have mine. But Anderson realizes he's running very low on supplies. He does some quick math and realizes he's got until about mid-April before he'll run out of food. So let's go ahead and jump forward to April of 1861. It's April 11th. The Union Army has tried to resupply Anderson here a few times, but each time they've been turned around from Confederate forces over at Moultrie and Fort Johnson. Confederates catch wind of another resupply effort being sent by Lincoln down the coast. They decide to get ahead of that issue. This time they're going to send another delegation over. They're not going to be so nice about it. They're going to say, look, you give us the fort, or else we'll be forced to fire upon you. And Anderson says, this time, I shall await the first shot. If you do not batter us to pieces, we'll be starved out in a few days. Well, he doesn't have to wait too long for that first shot. April 12th, 4:30 in the morning, a mortar shell is going to be fired from Fort Johnson on James Island, arcs over the harbor. It explodes over Fort Sumter as a signal for the surrounding Confederate positions: Cummings Point, Battery Wagner on Morris Island, Fort Johnson on James Island, floating batteries in the Charleston Harbor, Fort Moultrie over on Sullivan's Island, to simultaneously open fire on Anderson and his men stationed here. That bombardment's going to last 34 hours. Miraculously, no one is killed in that 34-hour bombardment. Unfortunately, though, a hot-shot round will lodge itself in the enlisted officers' quarters that ran along this back wall here. Catches that structure on fire. Now, generally speaking, a fire inside of a fort is not a very good thing. It's even worse if, say, that fire breaks out near where you're storing your powder magazine. That could be a huge explosion. So Anderson, he quickly pulls his men off the guns, realizing he needs to seal up that powder room before the whole thing blows up. And the good news is they're successful in doing so. They've sealed up that powder room, they've staved off that explosion. Bad news is they sealed up their powder room. They can't shoot back now. So the Confederate forces, they realize this, they see smoke billowing out of the fort, notice there's no return fire being shot back, so they decide to send another delegation over. It's April 13th about this time. They're going to see what he has to say now. Anderson receives that delegation. He realizes, I'm low on food, I've got my powder sealed up, can't shoot back. I think now's probably a good time to get out of here if you don't think so. So he does, he takes him up on that offer. He says, you know what, we'll just go ahead and leave the fort's yours. It's not technically a surrender, it's an evacuation, no one's taken prisoner. But before they leave, they want to conduct a little ceremony, a 100-gun salute as they lower the flag. Unfortunately, on the 47th round of that 100-gun salute, one gun prematurely discharges, instantly killing a private Daniel Howe, mortally wounding another private Edward Galloway. The death of these two men will mark the first deaths in the American Civil War, a conflict that will involve the lives of over 3 million men, costing over 700,000 of their lives, and then the balance hanging the freedom of 4 million enslaved people. American Civil War is the deadliest war in American history. If you take every other conflict America's been involved in, add up all the deaths, you still do not come close to the death toll of the American Civil War. So, it's April 14th now. Anderson and his men, they're put on that supply ship fleet that's been sitting off the coast, sort of watching everything go down. They're going to hook a U-turn, head back up to New York City, where Anderson and his men are received as war heroes. Confederates are going to move into the fort here. They're going to hold this position for the next 4 years, until February 17th of 1865. They'll only leave whenever they fear that their capital city of Columbia in South Carolina is being threatened by Sherman and his forces. So they'll head up that way to defend that city, and the Union forces will move back into Fort Sumter here. Now my question to you is, why does any of this matter? Why did you all come out here today? Took time out of your day, took time out of your vacations to come out here and see a fort that's been destroyed 2/3 of the way down, not really much here to see. Well, I think it has something to do with what I was talking about earlier, about how history is not a series of predetermined events, but rather a series of split-second decisions made by individuals. Individuals, like I said, presidents, politicians, soldiers who lived and fought and died here, not just here, but in battlefields all across the country. Women who served as nurses, tending to life-altering wounds. Children who sometimes served as drummer boys or flag carriers, or who even just lost their parents to their respective causes that they went off to fight or serve as nurses in the Civil War. Individuals like you and I. Individuals like our ancestors, and individuals like those to come before or after us. So, as I was saying, as you walk around the fort today, and hopefully as you're listening to my talk, you are thinking about those individual actions and the role that they played in determining the course of our history. And as you walk around the fort and maybe go into the museum, read some of these signs, like I said earlier, continue to think about those individuals. Think about the actions that they took, the decisions that they made, and how those overall decisions and actions changed the course of our history overall. And with all that being said, if you all have any questions, please feel free to ask myself, the other ranger or volunteer here today. And on behalf of myself and the National Park Service, welcome to Fort Sumter.
Thank you.